Alright, in this video we're going to cover just sketching within Fusion 360 and looking at the 2D environment of Fusion 360. In order to start this out, we're going to always, anytime you're starting for a new design, so we are in the design workspace, and under the solid grouping we're going to be creating a sketch. So anytime we start a sketch, we're going to end up having the option of utilizing what they call the principal work planes. So right now we have an origin point, which is a defined point in space of 0, 0, 0. So for the X, Y, and Z coordinates. So what we're going to end up taking a look at within our particular file here is we're going to choose a principal work plane to work off of. So depending on which orientation you want your sketch to start on, typically the most common one to start off with is the one right here. And this deals with your principal work planes. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to just select the work plane, and then anytime you go into sketch mode, Fusion will automatically put you looking normal or straight on at the sketch plane. And here we're able to go through and take a look at a few things. So here within the create panel, you have all your options to create different lines and different tools. So here at the top, you'll see they're kind of grouped. You can create lines, you can create sketches, utilizing different polygons and different options there. You can create text, and then you can also mirror, circular pattern, rectangular pattern. Those are some efficiency kind of increasing tools that can be used in the sketch environment. And then you also have like project include and a sketch dimension. So one thing that we can do when we start to sketch, I'm gonna go ahead and click off of this, is we can use some of those to help us out. We have different modify tools which can be used to help us create different ones. We're gonna do very basic sketching, just kind of fundamentals as we go along. And then we have different constraints. These are also known as the geometric constraints. So these are some constraints that can be added to sketches to make sure that there are things that don't go through, and sketch geometry that kind of gets unconstrained or kind of moves around as we go and model some different components. So we also have some different options within inspect, insert, and select. These can be a little bit more useful in the 3D environment, and that's why, other than maybe insert with inserting pictures or anything like that, and then also some of the selection tools. You also have the sketch palette, which allows you, it's kind of a shortcut key. It allows you to turn on like the snap mode if you want to snap to a grid in this case. It allows you to slice, which allows you to do is to slice through an object and see some things, and then has some look at options showing a profile and points. You can turn off dimensions or show the constraints and things like that as you sketch, or turn on the construction lines. So those are lines that would be ignored by, let's say, a 3D feature such as Extrude in order to go through and to create some. All right, so one thing I'm going to do is I'm going to use the line tool. I'm going to do just a very basic kind of shape here. In general, you always want to go through and start from the origin, because that allows you to, because the origin is the only defined point in space on our sketch. So that's 0, 0 in this particular scenario. And what we want to is we always want to make sure that we snap to it. So I'll show you a difference between this. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to start the origin first. I'm going to click. So I'm started there, and here you can either punch in a dimension for a line, or usually what kind of the general modeling method is you would just go through and just kind of draw it to the relative size and shape. So let's say if I do about 3 inches, and then if I go across, let's say I make a rectangle of about, let's do about 4.5 inches, and I can click. And if you notice here, here's some things that as you get kind of close, you'll notice these blue dashed lines. Like here, I'm getting on the midpoints from those previous 2 lines. But those dashed lines are helping me, one, it's also helping me, you'll notice your line kind of snaps into place. It's helping me maintain, a 90-degree angle between that last line that I just drew. And then when I get down to here, you'll notice I'll also kind of get a snap, and it kind of stops right there. So what that is, or if you don't get that option, just go over, you're not going to click, you're just going to touch that point. And then you're going to come back over and you're going to see that blue line. It's kind of hard to see there with the axis, but when I draw this without it not being on the origin, you'll see that. So I click, and then I click again, and then what you'll notice is once you get an enclosed space, it goes through and it will highlight in a light blue color. Now the one thing you'll notice, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to cancel out of my line command. And I have 2 black lines. So the line on the y-axis and the x-axis is black, meaning that it is fully constrained. That means if I try to click and drag these lines, they're not going to move, which is what we want. So the blue lines now, you'll notice I can adjust and move these around. I can make this rectangle a little bit taller or either narrow or wider. And that's the thing that we're kind of wanting to look at, is that what exactly, does this mean? So you'll see these little icons. This is a perpendicular constraint. So again, that's dealing with your geometric constraints. So those are automatic sketch constraints that are placed in. You'll see this icon over here, which is a vertical constraint. So that means that that line is vertical with that axis, and it maintains that. And we should also probably see there would also be a horizontal constraint there as well. But it looks like the perpendicular constraint is also keeping that in place. So here's some things that we can do. Let's go ahead first though, and let's take a look at drawing this without our particular, without going to the origin. If I draw this out in space, you notice I still get the help from Fusion. And here you'll notice I don't get that blue line helping me there. So again, if I just touch the end point of the line of the very first line that I drew, now I'm getting that blue dashed line. So again, I just go over and I just touch it. I don't click on it or anything like that. I'm just touching. I'm just going through and I click, and then I can click to finish it out. One thing you'll notice is that now all 4 lines are blue because it's not constrained to the origin. So in general, we always want to make sure we're being constrained to the origin when we're sketching, because now I can drag this particular shape all around and manipulate it. And that's one thing that I always kind of show to students, is that how, what are the things that you need to do to keep that from moving? And that's what we're going to look at next. So I'm going to go ahead and let me highlight this. Let me move this over a little bit, and we will take a look at the first shape. Okay, so within this first shape, I'm going to take a look at what are some different constraints we can do to keep this from moving up and down and side to side. So these 2 blue lines. Well, the easiest way to do that would also be to have a sketch dimension. So sketch dimension can be found in the Create panel. It can also be found here. I believe it is defaulted in Fusion 360, or you can press the D key on your keyboard to bring that up. So if I press the D key, it'll highlight. I can select the line, and allows me to pull a dimension. So again, maybe I only want this width to be 4.5. I can type 4.5 in, hit enter. And that's the other thing too, and maybe I want the height to be 3 inches, like what I had originally set. So I can also do a double click. I clicked on this bottom line, I clicked on this one. So look at the arrowheads, how they're pointing. I can click. You'll notice that in this text, a lot of kids will want to hit backspace, or they'll click inside this box and then backspace every number. But actually it's already highlighted in blue. That means whatever you type in there is going to be overwritten. So I'm going to go ahead and just type 3 and hit enter. And we're defaulted in inches here, so that's why we don't have to worry about putting in units. We just punch in a number and hit enter. So now you'll notice that I'm going to cancel off of the dimension tool. You'll notice now I can go through and I can't move these lines. And so that means that it's fully constrained, and that would be a good indication that now I would be ready to finish the sketch and extrude the shape. For this one, for this particular shape, let me go ahead and bring this up just a little bit more off of this axis. The issue with this is when I go to do the same constraints, so if I do sketch dimension, so again, if I do side to side, I do the 2-click option. I can do 4.5. And on the height, I could also just click a single line sometimes. Depends on what you're drawing. You may go through and get by with that. You're going to notice that all the lines are still blue, because even though I've got this set, so now here we go, and this is why. It's because I can still move this around. So if I click and drag on any of these lines, I can't make it any wider or smaller in terms of height, but I can also go through, but I can still move it. So, and here's what the cool part is. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to get rid of my first sketch. Okay, highlighted that and pressed the delete key on the keyboard in order to make that happen. And I'm going to use something known as the coincident constraint. So the coincident constraint, when you click one point to another, it makes those points appear in the same spot, or they would go through and be constrained to each other at a particular point. So I'm going to click coincident. This is just a little intro to geometric constraints. I'm going to choose the corner of my rectangle, and I'm going to choose the origin point. And what that does is now you'll notice it moved the rectangle to the origin, and it's snapped, constrain that corner to the origin point, and now all the lines are black because we can't move the sketch anymore. So it is fully constrained. All right, once we're fully constrained, I can say finish sketch. I always like to go through and click on the home button. When we come back to, I like to be able to see what's going on in the sketch. And then I can always do something like extrude. And then here I can type in a value. I can click and drag the little arrow to go through and to do this, to extrude either toward me or away from me. And let's say if I want to do a 3-inch measurement, let's say I just type in 3. So sometimes depending upon what's happening, you can do that. And there we go. So I can say OK, or I can hit enter, and there we have gone through and just extruded a very basic shape just to show how to use Fusion 360's sketch options.